Hello and welcome to another episode of the History of the Blood War series. I am your presenter, Jay Onwoka. In this episode, I'm going to give you a look at one of the most pivotal types of devils in the Blood War, the Osyluth, also called the Bone Devil. These massive horrors of hell can often be found forcing their underlings into battle and otherwise doing the bidding of their superiors. Osyluths are known as the taskmasters of the Nine Hells, and they are as needed as they are hated. What should you know about them if you're getting ready for a showdown? Keep listening for all the key details. Bone Devils have been known since the oldest sources we have, and observations throughout the years have remained fairly consistent. They stand over 9 feet or 2.7 meters tall and generally weigh about 500 pounds, roughly 227 kilos. Their warped humanoid bodies are radically thin, so they look like gangly yet terrifying string puppets made of bone. Spikes jut out at freakish angles from many places on their bodies. The Osyluths' natural weapons are apparent: their nightmarishly long finger claws and their huge tail, looking as if it is composed of vertebrae up to its murderous stinger. It's said that Osyluths are cloaked in the smell of decay and rot, but it seems this smell is mostly bearable relative to other denizens of the lower planes. Also, in addition to their natural weapons, Osyluths do often use a kind of hooked polearm, largely unique to them, which can be used to grapple their opponents while they strike with their venomous tail. Osyluths communicate telepathically in most cases. New Wheel sources say that Osyluths speak Infernal, which is possibly a legacy of the Spell Plague. Before I go into more on facing the Osyluths in combat, I want to talk about a few myths found in the Old Wheel sources. It's always a good idea to take the sources of that era with a grain of salt, and these myths will help to show why. The first myth states that one of the Osyluths' abilities was to punish oath-breaking devils by sending them to the Pit of Flame, a notorious place of torment on Phlegethos, the fourth hell. It's said that Osyluths could even punish devils who were strictly more powerful than them. Only pit fiends were exempt from this. So, could this be true? It's possible. If all Osyluths answer directly to Asmodeus, which is also a premise of the next myth, then it's possible that Asmodeus could have set the punishment for disobedience as a stay in the Pit of Flame, and then empowered the Osyluths to catch people who disobeyed. That all said, there are two main reasons that I don't feel this holds up as part of Osyluth lore. Reason number one is circumstantial, but it's more about the outlook of the Old Wheel writers overall. The myth states that the Osyluths would send offenders to the Pit of Flame for 101 days. Specifics like this are a hallmark of Old Wheel writing, and the goal is to make it look as though they've made a complete survey of devil kind. But you have to ask, why would all offenders be sent there for exactly 101 days? In many cases, devils tie the torment to a victim. There's no explanation for the difference here. Basically, my charge here is that they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes as far as how much they've actually done as far as exploring the Nine Hells. Now, the second reason is simply a lack of evidence. If the Osyluths had a power like this, that's significant enough that it couldn't just be forgotten. The ability of Osyluths to sentence a powerful Gel'Ugan or Kornugan at their merest wish could disrupt a whole legion at a stroke. Yet this ability is never mentioned in the later sources. It's not immaterial on Osyluths, nor is it immaterial on the Pit of Flame. So that's the first myth. The second myth regards the so-called Ring of Tantrum. According to this, there are only ever 1,000 Osyluths at one time. Once every century, the Osyluths gather together with the Dark Eight, who are the chief devil commanders of the Blood War, to decide which Gel'Ugans will be promoted to become pit fiends. In this decision, each of the Dark Eight has one vote, then all 1,000 Osyluths together cast a ninth vote. This is to stand for Tantrum, the slain ninth member and originator of the Dark Generals. After this vote, The Osyluths graduate to the Haematula form, and a new 1,000 Osyluths are appointed. This myth has the same issues as the first one. It's too specific and precise, as well as not appearing in later work, but also one unique issue: scale. To be brief, the math just doesn't work out for there to be only 1,000 Osyluths in all of Devil kind. Going off of public data about the US military of our world, recently there were counted over 200,000 soldiers holding the rank of sergeant or its equivalent, but not including staff sergeants, master sergeants, and so on. That's in a total count of 1.2 million official personnel, which makes sergeants about 1/6 of the military's total strength. I use sergeants here as a point of comparison because they are generally considered as the backbone of military discipline, such as in the idea of the drill sergeant. In the sources, Osyluths are often referred to as police, so that gives us another point of comparison. Doing very rough calculations, from public data of police in a major modern city, I come up with about 1 police worker for every 120 people. The ratio of Osyluths to other devils is probably somewhere between those two extremes of 1 for every 120 to 1 for every 6. Given that we know there is a practically limitless number of devils, there's no way that only 1,000 Osyluths would be equal to the task of keeping tabs on all prospective pit fiends, while also informing on other disobedient devils. Why do myths like this crop up? To me, it's a mixture of inexperience and misunderstanding of those scholars. We can easily take for granted the hundreds and even thousands of adventurers, mages, and truth seekers having visited the 9 hells and brought back many different accounts and perspectives. The old wheel scholars didn't have that advantage since they were some of the first to venture into the lower planes. This feeds into the misunderstandings. Imagine one of the old writers overhearing some devils complaining that the word of an Osyluth got them sent to the pit of flame. Now, this writer could assume, as it seems they did, that an Osyluth had the power to send a devil to the pit directly. Or it could be that the Osyluth simply reported the offense to a greater devil, then the greater devil laid out the punishment. We are, of course, indebted to these old wheel writers, but we should always look at what they provide with a critical eye. Most of the details in these strange tales had left the sources by the time of the World Tree, but I mention them here because it's possible that there is some truth to them. For now, let's move on to talking about what you should prepare for in a fight with an Osyluth. Sources agree that Osyluths have immunity to fire and poison, some level of magic resistance, and the ability to see in total darkness. Most sources also agree that Osyluths exude an aura of supernatural fear. These factors already make Osyluths formidable opponents. On top of all this, Osyluths are able to fly. The more recent writers call this an innate ability, even depicting Osyluths with wings, but classically, Osyluth flight was ascribed to a spell-like power. In combat, Osyluths can attack with a savage bite, their wicked claws, and their unique hooked spear, but their main fatal weapon is their prehensile stinger tail. The Osyluth stinger is loaded with a venom which rapidly destroys the victim's muscles. If the Osyluth is using their hook, they will grab their opponent with it and hold on while they employ the sting. If weaponless, Osyluths attack in a blur of claw slashes and strikes with the stinger. Once they sting an opponent, an Osyluth is likely to consider them incapacitated and thus will move on, leaving the cleanup to their underlings while the Osyluth finds more enemies. The major spell power used by Osyluths is creating a huge wall of ice. New wheel sources say that the Osyluths have no spell powers, but this is worth mentioning as older sources emphasize it. Osyluths are known to be cunning users of these ice walls, bringing them up within the Rolling Demon hordes to break their momentum, divide them, and conquer them. If these walls are considered alongside other spell powers, such as teleportation, it's clear that Osyluths are extremely difficult to ambush. In addition, this wall of ice power can be used to trap others, either to isolate them from a fight or as a means of punishment. For those fighting Osyluths, the most important thing is to keep clear of its stinger. You may have an easier time against an unarmed Osyluth since they're not listed as trying to grapple opponents. The ability to dispel or counteract the wall of ice spell power will also give opponents a distinct edge. Those who are immune to poison will be able to stand toe-to-toe with an Osyluth, but even without its biggest advantages, Osyluths are large, strong, fast, and dangerous. Osyluths are also capable of flight and teleportation as stated earlier, so they're a threat from almost any angle. Divination and abjuration magic will be your best defenses against this. Usually, Osyluths in the Blood War lead bands and cohorts, units of lesser devils, rather than being with a group of fellow bone devils. Osyluths can, however, quickly summon reinforcements, either a mess of lemures or one other Osyluth. They can also make themselves invisible and cast gripping illusions. If you can't take the Osyluth down in seconds, you'll need some powerful magic on your side to counter all the trickery that Osyluths possess. As I've said, when we're talking about military organization, Osyluths are best placed as small unit leaders. Their role as snitches for superiors and the reputation for being enthusiastic slave drivers makes this their optimal position. In terms of the devil rank structure from the Military of the Devils video, Osyluths tend to hold the ranks of Centurion and Vice Prefect, roughly equal to a US Army captain or major. In battle, an Osyluth can be in charge of hundreds of lesser devils. They typically lead bands and cohorts of these weaker sorts, from the utter dregs of the lemures and Naparibos to those of reasonable ability like the Barbatsu and the Maragons. Particularly powerful, trusted, and connected Osyluths could even be put in charge of sets of more powerful devils, like Malabranches or Erinyes. Though the strictly more potent types might be capable of destroying their Bone Devil superior, their superior's value to the higher-ups is in keeping tabs on the others, so destroying that Osyluth is sure to bring down a higher devil's wrath. On the battlefield, an Osyluth is as strong as the unit they lead. If it seems that their unit will be destroyed though, a leading Osyluth will get away. Self-preservation can always be justified if it's in service of bringing vital news. Managing to take out the Osyluth Centurion during the fighting could have a number of effects. The momentum of lemures and Naparibos can easily fail if no one is forcing them forward. Barbatsu, Maragons, and similar battle-minded devils might continue to fight hard, but with no link to the rest of the military, they could blunder into trouble or simply hunker down and wait for different kind of orders. Stronger and more independent devils, on the other hand, might fall into vicious debate if there is no clearly defined leader. Taking out an Osyluth Centurion could throw a unit into disarray, but anyone doing this has to have a plan to quickly exploit that opening. Otherwise, devils are likely to fall into line with what other devil units are doing until they get their bearings. A final note I want to make is to emphasize that, more than anything, Osyluths are creatures of those higher up. It's likely that every one of the Lords of the Nine has their pet Osyluths within the Blood War forces, as do many lesser dukes. Legates in charge of legions keep direct communication with their favorite Osyluth officers strong in order to keep themselves informed about the state of their war machine. If you eliminate an Osyluth, it could have a devastating effect. Now, as unit leaders, Osyluths are easily replaceable. On the other hand, as a noble devil's eyes and ears, that duke could be rendered half-blind at a critical moment. If you're planning an audacious plot against a powerful figure in the Nine Hells, you'll more than likely have to deal first with their bone devils. I hope you've enjoyed this exploration of the Osyluths or the Bone Devils, and hope you found some of this material informative. I have been your presenter, Jayon Woka, and I look forward to seeing you back for another episode. Thanks.